Welcome back, wannabes and creators, to another episode of The Business of Art, the podcast that demystifies business for artists. And today on the program, I have Vito Delsante. Victor has worked for Speakeasy Comics, DC, and Action Lab, but I know him for his creator-owned book, Stray, drawn by the amazing Sean Izaakse, who we've had on the program previously, and who now draws for Marvel. This was a great conversation, and I can't wait to get to it. But before I do, I want to remind everybody that I have a Facebook group, which is all about helping authors and creators make more money selling books. And you can get to it at writingandsellingcommunity.com. We're just about to teeter over 700 members when I'm recording this. So who knows? On Thursday when we record, we may be at 700, or you may be able to push us over the edge. So please head on over to writingandsellingcommunity.com. And if you haven't already, pick up my new nonfiction book, Sell Your Soul: How to Build Your Creative Career. The first chapter is free at GoSellYourSoul.com. All right. Let's get into it. Take it away, Vito. Tell us what you're passionate about these days.
I'm really into, this sounds like the guy that just got out of jail or something like that, but I'm really into Hulu lately, and just catching up with things that I haven't seen before. Things like Preacher, which I'm still on the fence on in terms of whether I like it or not, but I didn't get a chance to catch it, when it first came out. So I'm doing my best to catch up on that. Blackish is another show on there that I'm trying to catch up on, and a bunch of little different things. I know it sounds weird to be passionate about catching up with TV, but when you have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, you don't ever get a chance to watch TV. So for me, I'm just trying to just feel normal. After fashion, I just finished Jessica Jones about a month ago, which shows how far behind I am. I haven't started Luke Cage yet because now I want to finish Penny Dreadful, which I really enjoyed the first episode, but I got to get back into it and just try to watch it. So I'm just the thing I'm passionate about is just trying to catch up with everybody else, I guess.
Are you able as a writer to watch these shows and enjoy them, or do you find yourself analyzing it while you're watching?
I mean, a little bit from side A and a little bit from side B. I can usually shut my brain off and just enjoy for what it is. There's always going to be the part of me that's watching these things saying, well, what would I have done differently? Or, if I were in this director or the writer or the actor's role even, what would my choices be in this particular situation? I was an actor for a long time. That's why I usually jump into that role in terms of viewing. But 9 times out of 10 though, it's really not about that for me. It's just, what can I do to just shut my brain off from what I'm working on and just kind of enjoy what I'm watching. Today, for example, there's a new movie coming out, I think with Channing Tatum, called Lucky Logan or Lucky Logans, and I was watching it, and there was it's a trailer. It's barely a trailer, and it seemed to be this idea where I think the idea is that it's a caper to steal money from, I want to say, the Daytona 500 or something like that. And it kind of stunned me because about 4 years ago, I had the idea to do something similar, but with the Kentucky Derby. So do I want to even pursue doing this still? Because something like this will exist and my thing will have to be compared to it. So there's a lot of different things like that I'll watch. Daredevil is very similar to Stray in some ways. Stray is very similar to Daredevil in some ways. But I don't think that the folks that enjoy the Daredevil TV show necessarily would enjoy the book per se, just based on the fact that like it's not. I don't think the audiences for the Daredevil comic book are even like a full Venn diagram like inside the circle. I mean, there's going to be crossover, obviously, because it's a street vigilante and stuff. But when I watch the Daredevil show, I don't get ideas for Stray. So I don't think that like I don't know. Like it's hard to tell what's in the minds of people that watch TV and read the comics. So I don't know if people are looking at the same things that I'm looking at. So it's I don't know. It's pretty easy to divorce the two sometimes. For me. Like I'm not entirely sure why that is, but like I like sometimes I can step back and step away from it.
That's so nice because I can never do that. In fact, I find myself in the middle of a movie going, "Oh, this is interesting. I wonder how it ends." Going and looking at the Wikipedia entry for like the movie, and then like that's one of the reasons I don't like watching movies when they come out because there's no Wikipedia entry to tell me how it ends.
Okay.
And then like analyzing every beat from like what happened before to the end and being like, these are so interesting, or like would have tried something else differently, or like to me, spoilers never been a big deal for me because I'm like, the process has always been like, okay, I know the end now. Great, they all like save the world in Avengers from whoever.
Loki, I guess.
Sure, from Loki. Like, okay, well, we all knew that was going to happen. Like, am I really spoiling it for you that Loki doesn't win? But the interesting part is like the character pieces in between and like how they mix the character. And that's where I find like I can't divorce myself in the writing process where like I'm always watching things, or like when I was reading Stray or when I'm reading anything, it's always like it always puts in the back of my like kind of lizard brain and it's like it's all working to like fix some problem in some other piece of writing that I have, or like going to like, oh, that's really interesting. It's really interesting how these two characters are working together. That dynamic would be interesting for this other thing. And then like 2 days later, I'll be like, I have
it. There's a lot of there'll be times when I'm reading, I don't know, maybe Batman, maybe Nightwing or Robin or Teen Titans or something like that. Something that's relatively similar to Stray, and I'll start reading it. And there's a part of me that's just, oh, that's a poor decision by the writer. What I would do. And then like, but I don't necessarily take it to the step of, if this were, let me see if I can steal this for Stray and do the right, you know what I mean? Like, let me just do that thing that I think that would make this story better in my book. I just do what I do and just let them do what they do. The best illustration of like being able to divorce myself from the media that I'm consuming versus what I'm working on is I make playlists on Spotify for just about everything that I write. And Stray's no different. Golden Guard's no different. When I did when I was doing Action Lab Dog of Wonder, I think we created one. But like I just will throw things in. I have a writing soundtrack, which is basically like nothing but 90s grunge, which is weird, but like, sometimes like I'll need 90s grunge, just to, get through. And 9 times out of 10, every time I tell people I do this, they say, well, do you listen to instrumentals? And I say no. And they kind of can't figure that out. Like, why are you listening to something that has, lyrics and words, and don't you ever hear something in a song that you're starting to write and all of a sudden you'd write that lyric in by accident? And that's never happened to me. And most of the time it's because these songs that I'm listening to are songs that I've listened to maybe 100 times, million times, somewhere in that weird middle ground. And I'm listening to the rhythms of it, more so than I'm listening to the words behind it. So Soundgarden, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, like I can listen to that stuff, Iron Maiden, like I can listen to all that stuff and just not get, complicated about it. Just let it be, let it just go to the amygdala or something, just let it just sit there with the rhythm. And like the rhythm is what I'm really responding to, because it helps me to type.
It gets you in the zone,
right?
Kind of gets you in that deep work,
right? And I've already zoned out on the music, so I'm not really paying attention to the music. So I'm really focused on what I'm writing, but the rhythm is what's driving me in the writing process. When I'm lettering, weirdly enough, I listen to a lot of R&B, like Janet Jackson or Sade, or I'll listen to Childish Gambino or Frank Ocean, and that's the stuff that's it's because it's mellow, and lettering is relatively new to me and a little bit frustrating. So listening to something mellow just calms me down while I'm doing it, and doesn't really push me, like where driving beats are pushing me forward in my story. The mellow R&B kind of like bass line, or like the keyboards, especially keyboards like on like Frank Ocean's Thinking About You, like the keyboards on that are like very like Hammond organ sounding, and so they just help me just kind of focus in a different way, where I'm just trying to just relax and get some fun out of lettering, because sometimes I don't find lettering fun. It's very tedious. So music just really pushes me in different ways. And so new music, whenever somebody throws me like an album or suggests a song or something like that, and I check it out, like that's the kind of thing that, like, if I don't know it, that's going to distract me from my process. And so, like, going back to your question about TV, like 9 times out of 10, I can't watch TV or a movie or something while I'm working unless I've seen it like a couple of times. Like if it's the new Doctor Strange, I'm going to watch it, but if it's 1989 Batman movie, which I know the words pretty much by heart, or especially That Thing You Do, which I know every word in that movie, I can ignore it and work and just keep going,
Yeah, I can't do that for anything. So it always impresses me. Like anything distracts me. Like I need silence. I can have the fan on. That's about it. My dogs, I can't have the dogs in the room. Like this morning, I was posting about, there was an article in a response to the Mile High comics pulling out of Comic-Con, and I just kept seeing the notifications come up and the replies, and I had to like turn the notifications off. I was like, I can't deal with this right now. I can't fight on the internet. I have to write 5,000 words today. So I tried, and it's always so interesting when I talk to artists and writers who deal with music. And in all fair, like it's a lot of, almost all artists that I know are either dealing with, or either listening to music, podcasts, or audiobooks or something while they're drawing. Writers is about 50-50, whether they have to work in complete silence or they have to work with like music on. But I totally get what you're saying, because it's hard to get into that process of deep work, that process of like getting in the zone and just being able to let it flow. And even more than how hard it is to get in the zone, it is incredibly easy to get out of that zone. So having that music, I would make an assumption, you can correct me if I'm wrong, kind of like gets you into that zone quicker and helps you stay in that zone longer, and maybe gets you more, like, even if that's a huge amount of extra work.
Well, that's why I don't listen to podcasts while I work, because podcasts are, in a lot of ways, they're presenting new ideas, like for that specific moment of like an hour or 2 hours or however long the podcast is, it's presenting a new idea that you probably are listening to for the first time. And so I get invested in that. Whereas even if it's like Comedy Bang Bang, which is an improv show, so like it's still presenting a new idea, something that didn't exist before the recording started. So for me, listening to stuff like that, as much as I enjoy listening to podcasts, whether it be a political podcast, a comedy podcast, I listen to a lot of podcasts about movies. Like How Did This Get Made? The Canon. I listen to like a lot of like really dopey inside baseball, highly critical things about movies. And How Did This Get Made isn't highly critical, but it is dopey. But like I'll listen to those things, and I have such a love for film, I guess, that like I really want to sit down and listen to that. I don't want to really take the time to use it as my background because I want to pay attention to it. Whereas, like I was saying, a new movie I can't do that with, but an old movie I can do that with maybe the exception of like a duck soup or something like that, because I know all the jokes, I know where the pacing is, but I still enjoy watching it as if it was the first time.
No, it makes complete sense. I mean, like I said, if I were to watch something while I was making something, I used to actually watch movies when I was writing movies, because like I used to like be a screenwriter and a television like writer, and that was a massive failure. I guess I can't even really say I was that thing. You have to actually do the thing at least once to like be that thing.
Right.
Right. And even though I have a very mediocre web series that I got out of it, like I would find that like the less distraction that I have, the more words that I get. Like I used to think that writing 5 pages of screenplay a day was good. And that's what, maybe like 500 words, maybe like 300, 500 words. And now if I...
Maybe a little more, yeah.
But now if I don't write 5,000 words a day, I feel like it's a failure of a day. So like my mindset and like what I have to do to get into that zone and the zone I have to be in and like the level of which I'm operating as far as the word count that I'm trying to get out a day is much different than I had back then when I was able to distract. What I would normally do would be like, I can reward myself when I get through to one scene with one television show, and I'm like, that's not.
I did something similar to that. I would when I worked in a law firm in Seattle when I lived out there, and it was in the evictions department, which means I actually had to kick people out of their homes. And it's a hard job, like it's not, I was very good at my job. And, when I worked in retail, I was very good at firing people because I can again, divorce myself from the emotional attachment of doing my job and how I feel about that person. I can somehow, be professional basically. And, when I would be working on a case, we had the internet. And this was back in '99, so like this is still like early internet, so all I really had was email. So what I would do is I would work on a case, and then whenever I found like a point where I could break, I would just go check my email, like for like 5 minutes, and then just to take something away and be personal. You know what I mean? Like something that could be me, so I totally get what you're saying.
So did you mentioned you were an actor for a long time. Did you always want to write comics, or is it something you kind of fell into?
Comics I fell into. What I really wanted, I really did, and I still do want to act. Like I'm very, I still very feel. I still feel like an actor, like inside, like whenever I'm watching something, like I feel like an actor. It's weird because I can, like, I used to sing as well. Like I was in a band. And so like when I hear a song, like a cover, like of whatever, I feel my voice, like in my throat tense up, whereas with acting, I feel the emotions that like I would feel if I were in that role. So writing was something that was kind of like it started with screenplays. I didn't want to necessarily write comics at first, but I was working on a film with a friend of mine was writing a film, and he wanted me to play the villain in the movie. So I just he's like, just take the script and tell me what you think and stuff. And so I read it, and it was really terrible. And I said to him, do you mind if I rewrite my part? And he's like, no, go ahead. So over like a Thanksgiving weekend, I rewrote my part, and then I read the script again, and I realized that I had the best part in the movie instead of the hero of the movie. So I literally then rewrote the entire script, which I probably shouldn't have done because it was, kind of like not a cool thing to do. But he was very open to it, and he was, very appreciative. So I realized, all right, so what I really am instead of a screenwriter is a script doctor. So this is 1996, maybe. AOL is still kind of new because I really consider AOL as starting in like 94. Because that was my exposure to it. That's when I signed up for it. But I, put on it's not a message board per se, but it was like almost like a bulletin board, like you put up ads on a bulletin board so it kind of functioned in that way. Does anybody need a script doctor? And the only two guys that contacted me were guys that were trying to make a comic. So that's really how I got into making comics. Like I kind of just put acting and screenwriting to the side and just, concentrated on learning, like the whole idea of how a comic is made, learning the structure of it. Like, thank God for Kurt Busiek, because he had there was a news group. This is dating it really, but there's a news group that was like alt comics or alt rev comics or something like that, whatever it was. And he had a seminar that he did at a college, maybe at high school, I can't remember. And it's all up on his website now. And it was basically how he writes comics, how he formats them and everything. And I just looked at that and I said, all right, well, I love Avengers Forever. I love Marvels. I'm going to just use this. And so to this day, I still use what I learned on that seminar that he wrote, that he taught as my guide for how I write comics. And the rest is, I guess, history.
Yeah, that's so interesting. As somebody who fell into comics myself, as a way to make movies for like a 90th of the cost.
Right.
I can totally relate to that. So you started doing comics in 96.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience to bring people up to speed to now?
There was a lot of, I was always interested in doing creator-owned comics more than anything. So I didn't really have that Batman story in my head or that Superman or anything like that. I want to do my own stuff. And the first comic I ever really tried to make was a book called the Mercury Chronicles, which had a shelf life for about a weekend at San Diego Comic-Con in 2006, because Speakeasy Comics, which eventually went out of business in the same year, they did a 0 issue. But I had started developing that as a kind of movie serial type of cable access show, where like we were going to try to do something at least once a month, maybe once a week if we could. It would be like sketch comedy, and then like there was this one section towards the end of the show that we had structured that would be kind of like an old 1930s movie serial. And so I wanted to do something that was very period and very appropriate for what movie serials were, like Flash Gordon, Batman, that kind of thing. So I kind of created this pulp character that called Mr. Mercury, who could not run fast. It was just a name that just made sense, with the whole idea of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds happening in 1938, and then the big premise was Orson Welles' War of the Worlds happened in 1938, and the Roswell crash happened in 49, I think, or maybe 47. So there was like 9 years there that like World War II happens in the middle of. So wouldn't it be interesting if you had a character that kind of spanned those 9 years with all this kind of weird stuff, like the weird Hitler occult stuff and, the aliens that possibly, colluded with the Nazis and all that stuff. And like, what if they were all connected? And so that was kind of like the through line of the whole thing. And so at some point I started developing it as a comic because kind of like you were saying, like you realize that it's cheaper to do it as a comic than it is to do it as a TV show at this part, or as a film. So I kind of recruited this guy. His name's John Crispin. I wish I knew how he was doing because I haven't talked to him in years, because I stopped working at the law firm where I met him. And John was an artist, and like I said, hey, do you want to draw a comic that I write? And he's like, sure. And I didn't know how it worked. I found that Kurt Busiek thing online, but I didn't know that, he probably needed an inker or, who's going to letter it. And I actually tried to ink it, which Marchiarello, who was the VP of like art direction or something over at DC, he actually looked at my inking samples and like put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You're a writer, Vito." And so I just realized that, okay, I am not going to try to do this anymore. So
it's the nicest way I've ever heard somebody say, "Never do this again."
Yeah, exactly. And I never have since. But, you know, like it was very DIY. It was very learn on the fly. Let's just figure it all out as we go. And it's a good book. I mean, like it went through a couple of different, you know, iterations and different artists. There was another guy that I worked with, Colby, that was an artist on it for a little bit. Then Jim Yuna, who ended up doing the Marvel Knights Fantastic Four series. He was the first official artist, you know, like once I realized what, like, because the story went through different iterations too. Like I became a better storyteller and a better writer and a better, like, you know, scripter, you know, like I learned format even better. So Jim came on and he got his Marvel work because of an 8-page sample from this book. Then Mike Lilly came on, and Mike Lilly just ended up, you know, not being able to commit much time to it because he was then picked up by Harris Comics to do a Vampirella story, and then he was doing stuff for Marvel. So I fell into that trap of like having a really good aesthetic for what I want a comic to look like, and picking and you know, meeting really great artists that are really great artists that end up doing stuff for other companies. And the trend continues today with Sean. So I kind of just bounced around. I somehow or other, like, I was working at a comic store in the city, in New York City, called Jim Hanley's Universe, which now exists as JHU Comics. And I made friends with a lot of editors, a lot of artists. I was the events coordinator for like the 11 years that I was there. So I met a lot of people. And one of the people that I met was Dean Haspiel. And Dean is my big brother in the industry and one of my greatest champions and biggest mentors. And he just came in one day and he said, "What would you do if you had the chance to do a Batman story?" And I said, I really don't know. And he said, "Well, I have this story that I'm doing with my friend Gabe for Batman Adventures, and we need a backup story. Would you mind doing a backup story?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." I didn't think anything of it. Again, I never had I love Batman, and I've loved Batman forever. Not I love Batman Forever, the movie, but I have loved Batman forever.
You can love Batman forever too. Everyone can have their guilty pleasures, Vito.
Chase Meridian, is that what we're talking about? Val Kilmer was a good Batman, but anyway. So I didn't really have a story like in my back pocket for what Batman what I would do with Batman, and it was 5 pages. I knew it wasn't long, and like everything you learn about story is beginning, middle, end, and first act, second act, third act, you know, that kind of thing. And I'm trying to apply it to 5 pages, and I'm really trying to be kind of economical with a story, but also give a complete story. And what I ended up landing on was the idea of Bruce Wayne going to therapy, and it's therapy that he's as a CEO has kind of mandated for his employees because he's trying to prevent there from being another Joker in Gotham City. So he's trying to, you know, like in modern context, he's very forward thinking in trying to, you know, present mental health solutions to his employees, you know, which is something that, you know, is constantly argued about today in terms of healthcare and stuff. But like, so he was, you know, kind of, I don't know why I thought of it, but like, I guess I was thinking way far ahead of, you know, the times that I was writing it, which would be 2003 is when it came out. So probably early 2003. And I just, you know, so Bruce Wayne at therapy, what is he, you know, what are you going to do for 5 pages? And it was, I swear to you, 9-page grids, maybe at the most 12 panel grids. 9 panel grids, of Bruce Wayne doing word association with the therapist. So you have Bruce on one side of the page, the therapist on the other side of the page. So they're on opposite ends of the page, but in the middle you have what Bruce is thinking and then what he's saying. So she says, "Trust," the therapist. In the middle panel, you see Batman shaking hands with Superman. And then Bruce says fund. So the idea is that he's always got to be on his toes, and he's always got to kind of keep his secret a secret, even though he's thinking a certain way. And I don't know, like maybe it's clever. I can't be the judge of that. I'm too close to it. And I go up because I was actually, I was lucky enough that like I said, I knew all these editors from DC, and I was invited up there by Mark Chirillo, and like we had lunch, and he was introducing me around, and one of the people that he introduced me to was Joan Hilty, who was the editor of Batman Adventures. And he introduced me to her, and she goes, "Hey, when you're done with him, can you send him into my office?" So we went to have lunch. I go into her office, and she doesn't even say anything to me. She just hands me a voucher and says, "I need you to fill this out." And so I'm starting to fill it out and everything, and I go, "What is this for?" Like, I really had no clue what I was doing, what was going on. And she said, "Oh, the story that you did with Dean, the 5-page story." I said, "Oh, okay, cool." And I was still kind of like blindsided by it, so I wasn't sure how to react. And so then I handed it to her, and she goes, "Okay, you'll get paid, whenever, and we'll send you a couple of copies, et cetera, et cetera." So I went back into Chiarillo's office, and he goes, "What happened?" And I said, "I think she just bought my book, like my story." He goes, "That's great. How do you feel?" And I go, "I'm very sweaty right now," which is the only thing I couldn't process it. I still can't process it, really. And so I leave DC's offices, and I start walking down Broadway towards my job at the comic store. And I get to about 39th Street, and there's and I almost threw up. And I stopped, and I had to put my hand on a light pole, and I started getting lightheaded, and I almost threw up because I started thinking in my head, which is, obviously the worst thing you could do. And I started thinking, Bob Kane, Bill Finger, Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil. And I just started coming up with all these names of people that I read growing up, and people whose work I admire, and people whose work that now my story is standing next to. And it just became overwhelming to me. And again, I literally almost threw up on the streets of New York City after signing a voucher for my first Batman comic. But it's funny because that story still, I'll see it pop up on Tumblr. People just reblogging it and "Oh my God, this is such a good story." And all I can think of is, how do I get these people to just look at my new stuff? Cause they're so all they're doing is just living in that moment of seeing that thing pop up on their timeline. And they don't realize that Dean drew it, and at one point I popped in on it, and I said, "Hi, I'm the writer. I thank everybody for checking it out. Here's my website, et cetera, et cetera." So from Batman, I did my first indie anthology a year later. I don't know. It was weird. Everything was working, in years. Then a year after that, I did a Wolverine story in X-Men Unlimited. Because I had like everybody else in the world, I had a failed epic pitch that almost went through. It was an Invader story, which now that I think about it, this is the first time I thought about it, but obviously that Invader story took place in World War II, and now I'm doing the Golden Guard, so I've always had that interest. I've always loved World War II as a motif, and I've always loved the All-Star Squadron and the Invaders and the Justice Society and stuff. So, it's just funny that the third thing I think I pitched was an Invader story, and here I am doing my own. But so the Epic story didn't go through because Epic eventually kind of fell under its own weight. But I really got along well with the editor, and she said, "Well, why don't you write something for X-Men Unlimited?" So I did a Wolverine story, and then I ended up doing a couple of Cartoon Network stories. I did a Red Sonja story somewhere in there, and then the big one was the Superman issue that I did that took place between, funny enough, his name again, Kurt Busiek's run and James Robinson's run. So I'm right smack dab in the middle with an Alex Ross cover and everything. It was not the way it was supposed to be. It was not planned that way. It was supposed to be, I think it was Superman Unlimited was a series that Darwin and Tim Sale and Darwin Cook started. And it was like just these random kind of out of continuity stories about Superman. And I knew the editor. He and I had worked on Scooby-Doo stuff, and he knew that I was chomping at the bit to do something like this, and he gave me the opportunity. And I was solicited for like the issue right after Tim Sale and Darwin Cook, and then that got canceled. Then I got solicited for a different issue further down the line. That got canceled, and then the book got canceled, and then DC lost a lawsuit regarding Siegel and Schuster's estate, and Superman 676 was supposed to come out written by Keith Champagne and drawn by Rick Leonardi, and they couldn't do it because it had something to do with Action Comics, #1 specifically. So Matt Idelson, who was the editor of Superman at the time, he's literally going to everyone in the office, according to Mike Lane, my editor, asking, does anybody have a completed Superman story? And Mike said, I do. And he threw mine up there, and it actually came in as Superman proper. And I haven't worked at DC since. but yeah, that was a very big deal, and I think that led to a lot of what successes I have now. I mean, I'm certainly not a success by a lot of different measures, but like I feel like I've done pretty well. You know, I'm still kind of relevant, you know, in terms of like people's interest in my work and stuff. So.
Well, you had this very interesting Facebook post, as we are Facebook friends, about you were talking about how it was something along the lines, and please correct me because I know I'm going to bastardize and butcher this, but it was like, you know, sometimes I get down on myself, and then I remember that like I have an ongoing series with Action Labs. I worked for Marvel, DC. I've worked for Simon and Schuster. I've done things like as a writer. Like I feel like I've had like a pretty good career, and I'm going to start looking more at the things that I've done instead of the things that I still want.
Right. That's basically what I said. I mean, I don't know the exact verbiage, but the easiest thing to do is to quit and just, you know, say what if. And I have a lot of what ifs anyway, but I have a hard time quitting anything. Like I have a hard time just, you know, shutting it off and just saying, yeah, I'm done, you know, and walking away from anger. I tell everybody I quit every week. Like once a week I quit comics because it's the best way I could put it is if the comic industry were a woman, I wouldn't have put up with this. Do you know what I mean? Like if a woman treated me like this, if my wife treated me like this, if it was a girlfriend, whatever, if a person that I felt close to treated me the way the comic book industry has treated me, and a lot of this stuff isn't really, you know, up for public consumption, you know, but like you know, I've had a lot of things happen. Yeah, I think that's a better way to put it. Like, I mean, there have been people that have actively sought to not give me credit where credit is due. So it's been a hard, you know, road. I mean, I've had but that's the thing. I've had a lot of successes in spite of that. And that's what I think is important to focus on, and is that if I post a page from one of my books on either my Facebook wall or the individual Facebook fan page walls of that project, a lot of people are looking at them, you know, and people like it. And like, I think that's what I want to focus on more than all the people that haven't seen it. Do you know what I mean? Like if there's 5,000 fans of Stray, let's say, on Facebook, and I post a cover image from an upcoming book, and 200 people like it, it doesn't matter that 4,800 people didn't like it. Probably, but I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on the 200, you know, because I think those 200 people will still make me successful in their support. Do you know what I mean? Like if you have 200 people that back you on Kickstarter for like $25, that's $50,000. I mean, is it 50,000? 5,000. Sorry, I can't do math. Yeah, but $5,000 is still a lot of money. It's still important, and it matters. So to me, that's still a success. So I want to take that and just kind of build on that instead of focusing on the people that aren't paying attention. I want to focus on the people that are, because I feel like if I do that more, those other people will start to kind of look back and see what it is that they were, initially excited about. Because I find it odd that somebody would like my Facebook page for Stray and then not engage. A good example is this week, and you and I, we haven't talked about it, but you actually sent me. That's my dog running upstairs. If you can hear that, by the way, there he goes. But you had sent me an email based on an email that I sent through Golden Guard this week, and it was basically that we send out a page a week, which is like a slow burn for an entire book, but we knew that we wanted to spend the time that we were using to make the actual book. We wanted to spend that time giving the readers and the Kickstarter backers the ability to learn who these characters are that they have no idea about. So we started doing this, one page a week, building to a PDF that eventually will be given out. And I had a couple of people unsubscribe from the mailing list, which was the only way that I could figure out to send the backers stuff without putting it on Kickstarter. You know what I mean? So first week we had one unsubscribe. Okay. Then the next week we had another unsubscribe. Then for a couple of weeks, nothing happened. And then last week we had 2 unsubscribes within a day of each other. And I just started thinking, is this not what we actually, this is exactly what we promised, and this is what we are delivering on. Why is it that people aren't engaging? Because we were only getting about 50% engagement, give or take. And I couldn't, and my biggest thing is I don't want to waste anybody's time. I want to make sure that if you are engaged with, what we're doing, you are getting the best bang for your buck. And I love you. You said, who cares? Just send it anyway. So, I mean, but I'm getting really good feedback from that poll that I put up. So I'm actually excited to see how it ends up at the end of the week. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I love polls, but at the end of so the reason I said that was because we've got a few thousand people on our mailing list for different things. I think we have 9,000 people across all of our mailing lists. And anytime I send an email, a dozen people unsubscribe, despite the fact that they've been getting emails from me for sometimes years, sometimes literally years. And I'm like, he unsubscribed? Why did he do that now? He's literally been on this mailing list since I started doing this mailing list. And it hasn't changed formats recently. So I put a little, I put stock in the people that are responding, like you talked about. I think this is one of the biggest mindset shifts that we as creators, or we as just business people, or we as humans can make to be happier. Because, everybody is a massive failure. The biggest success is a massive failure. I mean, you look at, let's just take, I think we can all consider Mark Zuckerberg a pretty successful guy, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
He's successful. His whatever, Facebook just sent a thing that they had 1 million or 1 billion or 2 billion total users, right? Out of 7 billion people in this world. It's a free service, and it's the most popular free service maybe of all time. And he still can't get everybody to use it.
Sean Izaakse doesn't use Facebook, funny enough.
Right. I mean, if any product is going to be used by everybody, Apple is a massively successful company. For decades, they only had a 1% market share. And that's just the people that used computers. They had 1% of that, and they were able to that means that 99% of people that use computers did not use Apple products. Now, even when it comes to cell phones, I don't know how it is now, but back when I worked for Sprint, like most people had Androids. At least 50% of people had Androids. And we're not even talking about the fact that Google is one of the most successful companies in the world and they can't get 100% market share. So, like, the long and the short of it is, I think Apple is the best example because, like, they just stay in their lane. Mm-hmm. Like, they know their well, not so much in the last decade, but, like, before then, for the first 20 years of their existence. Like, they stayed in their lane. They knew who was going to use them. They knew who they made products for. They knew how much they were going to sell of that product. Like, they knew that stuff. And while they wanted more, they focused really, really hard on the people that liked Macs. Like every ad that I saw of a Mac was like very much tailored to who I would imagine used a Mac. Even when the first iPhones came out, it was all geared towards like that kind of person, and we can all picture like the quote unquote ideal Mac user, at least historically. Yeah. Maybe people who are young can't picture this, but like for those of us who are a little bit older and have seen Mac commercials for a long time, like you kind of know who's gonna buy, who they were targeting. And like this is a company that is massively successful, and they've spent most of their life cycle catering to a very small percent of the population. And that was for a long time that was a very small percent of the population that even bought computers.
Yeah.
So I mean, when I started saying I'm going to focus on having one metric, because, you know, if you do business things, everyone's always talking about the 9,000 metrics you need, right? Like the mailing list and all these other blah, 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 blah things. And I was like, I'm just going to focus on one thing. And that thing is the amount of quality conversations I can have in a day, a week, a month, and a year. And if I can have enough quality conversations with enough people, I have found the rest of it all works out. Like, yes, do you need to know the business and all this other stuff? Yes, you need to know all of the pieces that you need to have these quality conversations and to do the right thing and have the mechanisms in place. But the minute I started saying, I'm just going to focus on having one quality conversation at a time and hopefully have it 50 to 100 times a week. And if I can do that, all the rest of this, all this other garbage money thing tends to work out. And guess what? I am way happier. I'm way happier because I'm not focused on like, oh my God, only 20 people liked my Facebook post or whatever. I'm focused on the fact that like I have a little Facebook group that people in this listening to this know about called Writers and Creators Making Money Selling Books. There's about 600 people in there right now, and I know those 600 people all want to know about books. The people on my mailing list that aren't unsubscribing are opening it and opening the emails and seeing the thing that I'm doing. They're responding to emails. They're doing it. It's not a ton. You know, maybe 1 or 2 emails every time I send something.
Yeah, you know, I put a lot of stock in the metric of engagement. You know, like I want to know not necessarily who is, you know, kind of paying attention or who I'm attracting or, you know, who's reading what or whatever. But like just to know that there's somebody, I'll put it a different way, actually. I've always thought that the biggest mistake any writer can make is writing for an audience, you know, like for a specific targeted audience. The thing that I've always thought that was the best thing to do is to write for yourself, because there's more of you out there than there is of the person that the hypothetical person that you're making up in your head. And I found that works 99% of the time. For that 1%, it's always somebody that will, in the case of Stray, say, well, why aren't you writing Nightwing? Or, you know, this is just a Batman or a Daredevil or whatever, you know, other more popular, famous superhero they can throw at you. Or the best one is always, why are you bothering making a superhero comic when Marvel and DC are the 90% of the share of comic sales in all of the world? And the only answer I could ever give is the only 2 answers I could ever give are, number one, this is my passion, and this is what I'm passionate about, and this is what I love doing, and these are the stories that I like to tell. And I always felt like what I'm actually doing is doing morality tales and mythology using the American mythology, which is superheroes. And the other part of it is, the second part is that, like, I reach somebody. I've reached at least, one person every book, so at least, like, and obviously it's not one, it's more than, it's 300, 400, whatever it is. And to me, those are the people that I really, I'm not trying to cultivate my audience or curate it in a way, but in a sense, I kind of am. Like, I'm trying to build on the success that I've had and give those people exactly what they expect from my book. But at the same time, I'm trying to evolve myself as a creator as well.
Right, for sure. And now so we have to work towards wrapping up, but like, I want to talk about Stray, because like, that's what, like, it's why we're talking right now is really about Stray. So like, let's talk about Stray. And here's the thing: before you get into it, I want you to tell the readers what Stray's about. But after reading Stray, the first volume, it is no surprise to me that like Sean works on Marvel books, and it's no surprise that you've worked for Marvel and DC, because like, it feels like it could inhabit that same universe stylistically. So can you tell us a little bit about Stray for people that may not know?
Yes, Stray is very simply the story of a sidekick who grows up. It's a coming of age tale. It's about Rodney Weller, who 5 years ago quit being the sidekick to the Doberman because of a falling out with his mentor. And so the answer, what the book really asks is, what kind of person does he want to be? Again, it's a coming of, it's every teen John Hughes movie basically, but with superheroes. And, like, it shows that he's made bad decisions. Like, when we meet him, he is a club promoter that sells drugs. That's not exactly heroic, but the idea is that he has a place to kind of redeem himself. Like, he has to build himself back up. But again, like, it's really, who do you want to be? Like, does he want to be the Rottweiler again? Does he want to be the new Doberman, or does he want to be something else? And ultimately, it is about creating your own path. That's why it's called Stray, because he strays from what two paths are in front of him. And again, like, I think what we did with the book was that, we built on these pre-established ideas around archetypes. Stray is obviously my love letter to Robin, the boy wonder, who becomes Nightwing. So you have your Doberman, who's Batman. You have your Titan, who's Superman. Sparta, who's Wonder Woman. And so we build on these archetypes so that you have these kind of preconceived notions of who these people are when you first meet them. And then what we do is we kind of turn it around on you and say, oh, well, you remember how you liked Nightwing a second ago? Yeah, he quit being Robin to sell drugs, to survive, basically. And now that we've killed Batman, what is Dick Grayson going to do? So that's, we take your pre-existing ideas of what these characters are and the boxes that they fit in, and we use that to world build, like, because once you've read it, so you would be able to answer this better than I could, but once you read the first page of the first issue, and maybe even the first 4 pages, which is, like a flashback sequence. Once you read those 4 pages, you've already decided exactly who these people are. And then we kill one of them. And so now it's a whole new world. The one way I've usually described it is, it's DC characters in a Marvel universe. Like, and I think that speaks to what you were saying about Sean, being able to move on to a Marvel book and my experience with Marvel and DC, because, we're very familiar with those tropes and those worlds that those characters individually, Marvel and DC, that they inhabit. So what happens when you kind of combine them? So.
Right. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, in the tradition of like Irredeemable, or like Tyler James's Red 10, or like things like that, where you're like, oh, I totally get who Superman is. oh, what if he's
Right.
evil? Like, oh, I know, I totally get the Justice League. Like, what if the Joker was killing them off one by one because they suck?
And I think Invincible is another one that we get kind of paired in with a couple of times, but I don't know. I think there's a more of a traditional storytelling technique that I try to employ, like more throwback than Invincible. I think Invincible is very, very modern in a lot of ways. It's super, super gory. So we would never do anything that gory. So it's very Bronze Age-ish, maybe early modern age. I don't know if any of those things matter to anybody.
Right. I mean, it's definitely not the violent. Like, it feels like a Marvel or DC comic that you could pick up any day of the I'm not saying that it's more interesting.
Oh, I don't take that as
DC comic. It's not being that, but it's like if you just said, "Hey, Stray," and you put a DC logo on it, you'd be like, "Oh, okay, like
right.
Stray, it's in DC now." Like all of the pieces in there completely fit in this style, whereas like you couldn't put Irredeemable or Red 10 or any of these things, stick a Marvel logo on it and be like, here it is in your local comic book store. Like, it just would not work. Whereas Stray, it absolutely feels like it could be in that world, and you could just be introducing a new set of superheroes and like an alternate not like Watchmen, but the way how Watchmen has alternate universes, like, so like this could be an alternate DC universe that like Earth 524 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I think there's a certain feeling of familiarity, and again, like that's all built in. That's intentional. Like, we wanted to, like, we have a Teen Titans type of group called the Teen Aegis. We have a JLA type group. We have the guy that is the major bad guy in the first miniseries is basically Two-Face. So there's a sense of, while you're reading it, I wanted it to feel like it was familiar, but there was a different, tact, and it feels lived in, I think, and I think, like you said, it could easily get slid into the multiverse of DC, and have them cross over. Would I be opposed to that? I don't know. I kind of like my toys on my end, more so than I like kind of the idea of crossing it over. But at the same time, I get what you mean now.
Like, so this is one of my last questions, and we're going to wrap it up a little bit. But like, why Stray? Like, why did you make this book instead of any of the other tens of thousands of ideas that must have rattled in your head over the years?
There's I'm sure I can come up with like 9 different answers, but the real answer is my dad was killed in a car accident when I was 15, and it really messed me up. Like it was probably the trigger for future depression that I would feel. And there's a real genuine part of me that is just trying to figure that out. That's still trying to move past my father's death, right? So this is an effort to do that, like through a character on a page, to be able to watch him kind of figure out what his life is going to be. And I'm 44 years old. I already know what my life is going to be. Like, I'm very happy with my family and my kids especially and stuff. So it's not like I'm projecting everything, but there's that 15-year-old boy inside of me that still exists that, was on my bed when my uncle told me that my father died. And I remember the look on his face, and I could still, in my like muscle memory, feel what my face felt like that day. And I think the reason why Stray just became more prominent in my head as to why I wanted to make this book at the time was basically it was, I want to say 2008 when Batman The Dark Knight movie came out, and seeing it just made me realize exactly how to tell this type of story about a sidekick and about moving past with whatever happened in his past, and kind of forgiving himself for some of the things in his past, and being able to, start to make his way back into what feels right, what is like the world that he should inhabit. I've had my ups and downs, they're all a matter of public record at this point. And I think that, like, when I look back, there was a point where I was just wondering, back then, like, will this be the end of me? Will this, push me towards, whatever entropy might await? And now that I'm here, I can look back and go, oh no, it didn't. It actually kind of pushed me forward towards a better fate, So I wanted to tell that story to people. I wanted people to see that, like, every kind of pain and hurt that you're feeling is temporary. Like there's an old I guess weightlifting adage that used to go, pain is just weakness leaving the body. And it's similar to that. It's very much like, it's all just right now. Like, everything is going to get better. Just give it till tomorrow, and then if tomorrow's worse, it's still going to get better. Like, there's always, that's the thing about, feeling depressed or feeling like you amount to nothing, is that when you're at the bottom, everything is up, so all you got to do is just look up and then just keep moving towards that. It's easy to get buried by it, but like, it's just a matter of just looking up, and so that's really why I wanted to do Stray, is that, like, I suffered that loss. Funny enough, I didn't realize it when we started working together, but Sean had suffered a loss as well, where he lost his father at a very early age, I think in his 20s. So, like, we both had that going into this, and we both kind of felt like, let's do this. Let's make this book about us experiencing that loss, because there is somebody out there that experienced this loss as well.
That's a great story.
Thanks.
I love it.
It's what heroes are. This is why we look to our heroes. People forget that comic books were maybe not invented or created as a means of escape from mundanities, but it became that. Like, in the 60s and the 70s, like, financial crises in late 70s and then 60s with Vietnam and stuff. Are you kidding me? Of course, I would rather read a comic book than watch the news. And today, we have similar kind of outside external forces that are kind of not cool. The guy in the White House for one, and just the administration for another, like, trying to get rid of healthcare that would affect millions. It's just, people don't look at comics as escapism. They just look at it as this thing that I've been doing for 30 years that I'm still doing. Why am I still spending this money? Whereas, but then the other side of the coin, where you have, like, younger kids that are getting into comics now who don't necessarily are looking for the escapism angle, but are looking at it as kind of the art of the time and the alternative to TV, movies, video games, the cheaper alternative, finding ways to express themselves through the art, because it used to be such an exclusive thing to be a comic book creator. I knew Chris Claremont's name first and John Byrne's name first amongst all other creators, but, like, I didn't realize I could be a writer. Like in the early 80s when I started collecting comics, I didn't realize I would be today talking about writing comics. So there are younger folks now that do see the potential of it, and, like, they're so savvy, and they use the computers, and they know the programs, and they're using Manga Studio or what is it, Pro Paint now and stuff, and they're so savvy with it, and they're going to school, they're going to college learning how to make comics. That wasn't a viable option, when I was in 1991 when I graduated. So like everything is just like turning around, and people are realizing that like the power of, the printed image,
Absolutely.
It's exciting.
All right. It is. It's a very exciting time. So, as far as exciting times for you, what do you have coming up in the near future?
Okay, well, Stray is going to be relaunched as a part of the Actionverse, new Actionverse series from Action Lab. It is currently in previews now. The order codes are July 17, 1261, July 17, 1262 for the action figure variant cover. And then Sean did this really cool Ferris Bueller's Day Off homage. And the order code for that is July 17, 1263. You can order these books up until August 18th, even if the catalog is not on the stands. If you use those codes, go to your retailer. You can tell them these are the codes. And the images are all over the internet, so you can definitely look it up. So that'll be out on September 6th, which is my daughter's first day of school, which you guys aren't excited about, but I am. And then in October should be the limited, it's mostly just for Kickstarter backers, but we'll probably have some extra copies of the Golden Guard Book 1 for folks to read and enjoy. And then after that, I don't know. I know I'm doing Midnight Tiger at some point next year, like early next year, maybe like February, March. So I'm taking over the writing for Ray Anthony Height, it's his character, but he asked me to write it. So that'll come on the tails of Stray. So basically I'm writing the first at least 10 issues of Actionverse, because Midnight Tiger will come in and take over for Stray. And then after that, I have no idea. Another Golden Guard Kickstarter in March next year, but that's so far ahead I don't even want to think about it. But that's it. You follow me on Twitter and Facebook, I guess, and you'll.
Hey! You're gonna.
I'm just saying, like, and you'll know exactly what I know.
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. I promise. Right, but now is the time when all of the people who were tuned out for the last hour drawing and like running and doing all of that stuff. This is the time when all of you come back. Come back and listen now. And you, Vito, get to impart the one piece of advice that you want people to remember from this interview. Whether it's something you've said already or something that you forgot to say and you want to say. But the piece of advice that you want people to remember leaving this interview.
The best piece of advice I could give anyone that wants to specifically write, but I think it works for drawing and any other type of art, would be to write what you know, learn what you don't, and then fake the rest.
Awesome. I love it. And now tell the people where they
can find it. If you just look up Incogvito, INCOGVITO, pretty much Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr. I think the only other place it wouldn't be would be Google+. Instagram, that's my Instagram as well. Incogvito, you'll find me. You can follow Stray on Twitter and on Instagram at I am the Stray. And there's a Stray Facebook page, so it would be facebook.com/straycomic. And the Golden Guard is also on Twitter. It is at 3 Rogues, ROGUES, 3 Rogues Studio. The number
awesome. The number 3?
Number 3 Rogues Studio, all one word.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
That was our show, Wannabes and Creators. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go find Vito online and tell him how thankful you are that he came on and shared his knowledge. And if you want even more knowledge, then head on over to GoSellYourSoul.com and download the first chapter of my book. It's absolutely free. And if you want help making more money selling books, head on over and join my Facebook group at writingandsellingcommunity.com. Don't forget to spread the word of this episode, rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. And most importantly, have a great day. I'll see you next time. Wannabes and Creators, peace out.